Now joining us is the play-by-play on Fox Sports 1 tomorrow night. You can watch that game at 10:30 Eastern Time. His name is Joe Davis. Joe, how you doing?
Good, guys. How are you?
We are great.
Living the dream.
Good to have you on the show. And BYU's 2-0 and ranked. Everything's good in Provo, but obviously a huge matchup this weekend that you'll be on the call for. And you've been on the call for a couple of BYU games the last couple of years, but what do you think of this matchup going into Saturday night?
Well, it's obviously intriguing. It's only the second time out of their 11 meetings they've met as top 25 teams. So within the history of the series, it's an important one. And the early season schedule for both teams, it's an important one with, I think, playoff implications on both sides. So you've got a UCLA team I think everybody agrees is a top 10 team. And then BYU, who's an interesting case because, as everybody knows, they're 2 plays from being 0-2. But they're not. They're 2-0. They're a top 20 team, and they've got a chance to kind of silence some of the people that look at what they've done so far and call it luck by kind of affirming what they've done. If you beat a top 10 team, it's hard to talk about beating Nebraska and beating Boise State as anything more than being a really good top 20 team to legitimize really where they're sitting right now.
Joe, you bring up an interesting point. We were discussing that earlier. As far as the hype around both of these teams, when you look at both of them, obviously both 2-0, but UCLA, hasn't really played, I guess, so far, a competitor, somebody that is well respected. And then you look at BYU, and like you said, 2 plays away from being 0-2. And so, with that being said, do you think that BYU or UCLA deserves more of the hype of where they're currently at?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. I hadn't thought of it that way. UCLA played a Virginia team that wound up looking a lot better than I think anybody thought they would against Notre Dame. So I think that gives some legitimacy to how badly UCLA laid it on Virginia week 1. And Brady and I did that game, so we got to see up close how impressive UCLA looked, how well-rounded they looked. I don't know if you can knock them for the 2 teams that they played who might not have been powerhouses. They took care of business, whereas, again, BYU is 2 plays from being 0-2. So I think at this point the hype, I think it's only to say, is most deserved for a UCLA team who hasn't had any issues through 2 weeks. But that can all change pretty quickly Saturday because this will be the first time that they play a team that's as physical as BYU is, right? That's the reputation of Bronco Mendenhall's teams. And UCLA, under Jim Mora, has had issues with those kinds of teams. He's never beaten Stanford. That's a team that, personality-wise, you can make comparisons to BYU, at least historically, with how physical they are on the defensive side of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how this edition of Jim Mora's UCLA team handles its first real physical test.
Another big storyline in this game is obviously the true freshman quarterback matchup. Pretty wild to have two true freshmen matching up in a game. I think there are 3 total among the top 25 teams, 2 matched up here. What do you think of Josh Rosen and Tanner Mangum so far?
I saw who it was, but somebody tweeted that this might be the first matchup ever between 2 true freshman-led top 25 teams. So I don't know if you guys have any way of digging and seeing if that's true or not. I know
we'll get our research team on that one.
Get your research team on it and let us know. I know we're trying to do the same to figure out if that's true or not. But 2 guys that have been impressive in entirely different ways. So Tanner Mangum, as you guys have seen, seems to be at his best outside the pocket. So if you're UCLA, the whole deal is making sure you contain him, right, and keep him from getting outside and extending plays and improvising and making things happen down the field by buying extra time. So the goal is to keep Mangum in the pocket, force him to beat you like that because he hasn't necessarily shown that that's what his strength is thus far. Not to say he can't do it. He just hasn't shown that's where he's at his best. On the other side, Josh Rosen hasn't been moved off his spot at all. That offensive line is so good that he's just been able to sit back there and through 2 weeks against 2 teams that, like we've talked about, aren't elite. But he's been able to sit back there comfortably and pick teams apart. So from BYU's perspective, it's move him off the spot, get him out of the pocket, see if you can force him to throw on the move, confuse him some. So it's kind of an opposite approach for the 2 defenses and how you approach stopping these 2 freshman quarterbacks.
Joe, I've been really impressed with Rosen's ability to not turn the ball over, right? And you know that's the biggest challenge for any freshman quarterback coming in is being able to ride the highs and the lows of producing touchdowns, but then also giving up the rock on the other side. What has been most impressive for you, and do you think that he's lived up to the expectations so far?
Yeah, I think that he set such a high bar week one, and he was so good against Virginia. He was National Player of the Week by a couple different publications. That he goes to UNLV and completes 60% of his passes, throws for 200 some yards and a touchdown. And people are like, well, what's his problem? I think that the bar that he set week one was so high that there's going to be times where he does look like a freshman. That said, and Jim Morris said it, they've tried as best they can throughout camp, at practices, and now obviously games present these opportunities, but try to phase him, try to get inside his head, and nobody's been able to yet. So I think the emotional side of it has been most impressive to me, beyond the obvious stuff of how talented of a passer he is. But something that I said after the first game, too, when I talked to a few people, was how impressed I was with the offensive line and how key they were to settling him in that first game. I mean, he didn't get touched against Virginia. He was so comfortable back there playing behind one of the nation's most experienced offensive lines. And you toss in the fact that you've got the Pac-12's top running back and Paul Perkins to help balance things out, too. There's not a better spot, I don't think, for a true freshman possibly to come in and play in. All that said, though, he's really remarkable physically and mentally thus far.
Joe Davis of Fox Sports is on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Joe, pollsters obviously think more highly of BYU than fans do in terms of the spread. 16.5-point line right now on this game. Why do you think that's so big?
I don't know. Maybe they forgot what happened the last time these teams met, right? It was 59 enough in the other way. I don't know. I mean, playing under the lights on the road, it'll be the first home game for UCLA where the students are back. School wasn't in session when they played Virginia a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how much they're looking into that, but it's going to be a tough place to come play. And, I mean, I think that it just comes down to people saying you might be 2-0, but I still think you're lucky. I think you're seeing a lot of people say that. So until even though that these are wins against two really good teams, right? It's been decades since Nebraska's lost a home opener. Boise State's a top 25 team. Even though they're wins against two really good teams, the fact that they came in the final play, and people want to try to make the point that you could, or some people may even say should, be 0-2, I think gives them pause when they're talking about a matchup against a team that you can't argue should not be a top 10 team. You can make an argument against BYU, but it's tough to make one against UCLA at this point. So I think that's why you see that spread probably skewed some.
Okay, Joe, we appreciate the time. You can catch Joe on the call on Fox Sports 1 tomorrow night at 10:30 Eastern Time. Good luck on the call.
Thanks, guys.